Welcome to my talk about NiceGUI. First, I wanted to ask you, is there anyone already using or knowing NiceGUI? Nobody. Wow, it's good that now you can learn something new today. Well, in this talk, I want to talk about the story about how we had a problem at hand at our company, and we didn't find an existing solution. And so we built something ourselves, and we kind of ended up with a pretty powerful UI framework, which is just taking off in the Python community. And it's also about the difference between building something that just works and something that is really a pleasure to use. So let's start with some background. I work at the company Zauberzeug in the beautiful Münsterland in Germany. We are about 20 employees. We do hardware and software developments from the initial idea to a prototype and maybe even to a product. And this involves electronics, mechanics, 3D printing, microcontrollers, software, and also AI. So just to give a few examples, this is an autonomous cleaning robot we built a few years back. We also built custom custom hardware components like this Zauberzeug robot brain, a small industrial computer which can control hardware, but also can run machine learning models on board. And one of our newest products, the Zauberzeug Field Friend, a small agricultural robot which autonomously does weeding jobs. As you can see, we often use or develop mobile robots where it is very important to get remote access, which also inspired the way we developed our UI framework. Zauberzeug roughly translates to magic tools. So we always try to develop things that kind of work magically, that are nice to use. Our philosophy can be described by the quote from Arthur C. Clarke: "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." And this not only holds for hardware, like the small weeding robot, which is traveling over the field and doing its job, but it also applies to software. Software that kind of magically works, which feels nice and is easy to build. And yes, this is live. You might have guessed it. Also, the whole slide deck here is implemented in NiceGUI. This is NiceGUI, and it just works. But why did we, as a small company, decide to create a new UI framework? It all started in May 2021, so about 2.5 years ago, where we developed a new robot, and the robot was kind of driving funny. And what you do usually, you try to tune the motors. We've been using the O-Drive motor controller, and there's a graphical user interface which you can use. It was in a very early stage, and we tried to use it to fine-tune the motor controller. And you can see it follows the concept that you can configure parameters you want to fine-tune. You can create your dashboard and define which parameters you want to change with sliders or number inputs. And once the robot is driving around, you can see performance plots on the right-hand side. What is nice is that it is working over the network, so the robot can drive around, and you have remote access to the robot and to the performance data. But we didn't like it. It was cumbersome to get your dashboard configured, and the software wasn't quite stable. And the idea came into our mind, couldn't we build something similar on the same concept that you have UI, which is kind of modular and which is provided over the network. And the O-Drive motor controller comes with a pretty powerful Python API, which is, in my opinion, much better than the graphical user interface. So we thought maybe Streamlit is a good match. Next question. Who knows Streamlit? Quite a few, OK. We thought this could be really nice because Streamlit allows you to write really simple user interfaces that are running in your browser. And it's really popular for its simplicity. I would say it's maybe the most popular web-based Python UI framework. But we had quite some problems with it. The syntax is pretty non-Pythonic. If you look into how the button click is handled on the right-hand side, they use an if statement, if button, then something is done. And the if statement is not primarily an if statement, but more a when statement. When the button is clicked, then the code below is executed. And they do it by reevaluating the whole source code again and again. And this messes up your state. If you are connected to a robot and you have some state somewhere, some background thread is continuously reevaluating the code, which was quite an effort to get working, but it wasn't nice. Streamlit definitely has its use case, mainly in the data science community, but it didn't work for us, and that's why we thought about something better. And then I started with some wishful programming. That's something I called simple UI at that time. This is the result of a few hours tinkering around and thinking, how would I like to write UI in Python? And the result you can see here, instead of these magic if statements, we use simple lambda statements that can be passed into event handlers. And as a basis, I used FastAPI as the backend server and an Angular frontend, which is served to the browser. And then we thought about the name. We thought, OK, now you're writing frontend and backend in Python. Isn't it just Python, just Py? And then we found JustPy, a library which is already existing and which allows you to write a UI like this. As you can see, they are pretty close to HTML. You create a page, then you create a div, whatever div is. And it's a bit complex. It's hard to spot what's actually happening here. And even though they have basically solved the whole underlying communication problem, it's a bit much overhead, and we didn't like the look and feel. And we thought maybe we can put a layer on top, and that's how we started. In the very beginning of our development, we used JustPy under the hood, and later we removed it for several reasons. Yeah, that's where we started building NiceGUI. And the core idea is it should be nice for everyone, for the user, for the developer, for us as a maintainer. We chose this image as the logo to make clear it's going about to be nice. And one objective was a Hello World program should be simple, should be short. You import NiceGUI, you place an UI element, and you run it. And then there's no build step, no compile step, no config files. You just start the script. The UI is opening in the browser automatically. And as soon as you change the source code, the UI reloads automatically, which makes it really easy to develop your UI interactively, basically. I already showed you with the simple UI example, we use nesting context managers for creating hierarchy. We think this is a pretty intuitive way to create structure. So if you want to place two labels in a row in a card, you could just simply nest it in with statements, and you get the result. And this is pretty similar to how HTML, for example, works. If you compare HTML to NiceGUI, it's pretty close. I would argue NiceGUI is a bit cleaner, and we don't need closing text. We just use the language feature that Python uses, indentation. And in comparison, I tried to create the corresponding JustPy example. They don't have the automatic context managers, but explicit add statements. And again, it's pretty hard to see what is the structure of the UI on the right-hand side. As I already mentioned, we don't use the Streamlit approach of these impressive but pretty hacky if statements. We use regular callbacks that can be passed as a parameter to a button, for example. Yeah, once you click the button, then whatever is written here is executed. In this case, we see a notification. We don't have the time to go into technical details. It's probably very interesting, but here I only want to scratch the surface of what is actually happening. The browser is basically requesting a route, in this case, just slash, so the root page. And the Python backend responds with some HTML. The HTML contains some initial UI elements, in this case, a button, and some JavaScript, which instructs the browser to render these elements and to open a WebSocket connection to the server. So the browser gets back to the server, opens or asks for a WebSocket connection. The server responds, of course. Now both have an ongoing WebSocket connection for low latency communication between each other. And now, whenever something happens on the front-end side, for example, the user clicks the button, it can send a message to the backend, and the message can be interpreted, consumed in the backend with Python, with your business logic, and the server can decide what should happen. In this case, we should show a notification. The server sends a message to the client, and the client can do whatever it is told. So the backend, the NiceGUI app, basically steers the front end from Python. So NiceGUI, which is the backend, is basically a fancy web server. I want to show some small conveniences we built into NiceGUI to make it even nicer. We already have seen that you can simply pass a lambda statement or a function into a button, and whenever the button is clicked, the function is executed. But sometimes you need event arguments. You can consume them optionally in your event handler. So this small e here will be automatically filled with event arguments. And whenever we change the number here, we see the value in the notification. But you don't have to use them, because we don't want to clutter our code with event arguments that will never be consumed. So you don't have to specify the E. You can just leave it like this, and the button works without event arguments. NiceGUI also handles the context automatically where events are consumed. In this case, we have 2 buttons. As already mentioned, both buttons are kind of magically placed inside the context which they are written in. It's pretty intuitive, but there's quite some things going on in the background, so that the button knows that it belongs into a card. The card knows it belongs into the row. And whenever the label is created inside the event handler, the label also knows that it belongs in this card. And on the right-hand side, the sunglasses are moved to the right-hand card. This seems a bit trivial and not that important in this example, but if you have a multi-page UI with many pages served to different clients, then it's pretty important which client gets which elements and the correct changes. What if your event handler is async? Just plug it into the button and it works. If your event handler returns something awaitable, then NiceGUI will automatically await it, because what else should happen with an event handler if it isn't finished, then NiceGUI awaits for it in the background. So in this case, the second notification appears a second later, no problem. And by the way, we strongly support the async I/O framework of NiceGUI. Given the fact that we are building on top of a fast API, it's kind of clear that we are using async I/O. But it allows to stay responsive while we are waiting here. If this would be a synchronous wait, then we couldn't use the user interface while we are waiting. But this works pretty easily here. A very common pattern we use for NiceGUI UIs is the builder pattern. So elements come with many methods that can be changed together. In this example, the button is augmented with the outline property. I haven't mentioned yet that we built upon the Quasar UI framework. So the button is actually a Quasar button. Quasar is a JavaScript framework. And Quasar comes with lots of props to customize these elements. So without doing too much code in the NiceGUI library itself, we automatically provide many ways to customize UI elements. In this case, Quasar props. But we can also use classes, in this case, Tailwind classes. I don't know, maybe someone already knows Tailwind CSS, a pretty powerful framework for styling web elements. So next to Quasar props, we can use Tailwind classes. We can also apply plain CSS and 2 more event handlers so that the button zooms when we move over the button. And this all without using a single local variable. I mean, the button doesn't have to be assigned to a button, and then we call different methods. This can be nested in the statements, and we can, with very little code, we can achieve quite a lot. Because the Tailwind API is not that well known in the Python world, because usually you can't use Tailwind with Python, it can be a bit difficult to remember all these classes. mauto, you have to know that there's an mauto, otherwise you don't expect it to be there. But that's why we created the Tailwind API in NiceGUI, which comes with lots of methods. They are automatically scraped from their website. So we go through their documentation and we pick all possible properties and all possible values, automatically create this API, and then the IDE can auto-suggest you properties and also valid values for your Tailwind styling. You don't have to use callbacks to update other UI elements. You can use the powerful binding, which is baked into NiceGUI. In this case, we have a number and a label which binds its text from the number value. And there's also a transformation applied to the value, so that whenever the number changes, the text also changes automatically. And why not? We have a slider which also binds to the number, but in this case it's the two-way binding, so we can also move the slider and the number changes automatically. And of course, the label also changes because the label binds to the number. When using NiceGUI for a while, we noticed a common pattern we often write, which is you have some UI container, and the container depends on some state. And whenever the state changes, you want to basically update the UI container. And then we cleared the container, and we regenerated the content. And this sounds trivial, but sometimes you have the container rendered on different pages, served to different clients, and now the state changes for one of them, and it's pretty hard to keep track of what should be cleared and what should be refilled. And that's where we created refreshable UIs. It's a decorator, UI refreshable. You can just decorate a function with this decorator. And now this function gets a new function. Now you can call show temperature refresh whenever the slider changes. So whenever the value changes, this function is rerun and the container is automatically updated with the new value or based on the new value with new UI elements. And just a few weeks ago, someone on GitHub suggested we could also use something which comes from the React world, like state variables. So in this case, in the refreshable UI, we are creating a state variable which comes with its own setter function, and we can simply on-click call this setter function, which will automatically recreate the refreshable UI. And this is another way to update your UI kind of magically. As I mentioned on different multiple times already, NiceGUI is built on many great technologies. It provides a beginner-friendly abstraction, so you don't have to know about all these underlying frameworks. But I think what makes it a bit special is that you can always go deeper. NiceGUI allows you to create, for example, custom HTML elements. If you need a paragraph or an ordered lists or tables, whatever, you can always place custom HTML code on your page. You can also place custom CSS, maybe blocks of CSS definitions in your page, or you can style your elements with custom CSS styles. That's all possible if you need some really fancy styling. Since we are relying on JavaScript, it was pretty easy to implement that you can also call arbitrary JavaScript. So a user asked me if NiceGUI can deal with geolocation. Can NiceGUI tell the geolocation of the user? I didn't know, but JavaScript can. So by calling the correct JavaScript code from NiceGUI, NiceGUI can give you also the geolocation of the user. So this way, NiceGUI opens the JavaScript world for the Python user. And not to mention the thousands of libraries out there, JavaScript libraries, that you can tap into with NiceGUI. Vue is doing the heavy lifting in the front end. In the beginning, I mentioned that I started with an Angular prototype. JustPy was based on Vue, and that's why we also adapted it and built NiceGUI with Vue. And I'm very happy with this choice. Vue is definitely the reason that we only need very little front-end code, and the rest is done by Vue. I mentioned we are also using Quasar elements. Most of the elements you have seen until now are Quasar elements that are integrated in NiceGUI. So a button is basically a Quasar button, which is just a pretty powerful wrapper for standard HTML elements. And I talked about Tailwind, which not only gives you concise and consistent styling possibilities, but also responsive design tools. So you can build a responsive app that changes the layout when you have a smaller screen or not. This is all available in Tailwind, and this way it's also available in NiceGUI. And once you start using Tailwind, you don't want to get back to CSS, actually. And of course, we are based on FastAPI, which gives you the possibility to a NiceGUI app is basically a FastAPI app, so you can add custom REST endpoints or use middlewares like for authentication. And you can also add NiceGUI to existing FastAPI apps. So this way you can transform your FastAPI project or start to transform parts of it without rewriting the whole UI, but to start with a small part. And last but not least, we built on Python. I mean, we are on a PyCon in the end, but a user asked, oh wow, I can use nested if statements in class definitions. Yeah, sure you can, that's a Python feature, you can use nested if statements. But I mean, Python is such a nice library, language, just perfect for a library like this. Version 1.0, this was the point where we removed justPy as a dependency and rewrote basically the whole core of the library. Is about 1 year old now. We have about 100 UI elements. You have seen pretty basic UI elements, but we also come with high charts, Plotly, PyPlot, Accurate, a library for 3D rendering, a joystick, audio and video, and lots of more pretty complex things, but many things we can just tap into because they are already built and maintained in the JavaScript world. We update almost weekly with new releases, bug fixes, new features. And we have a really strong community of nice guys and nice girls, of course, on GitHub, Reddit, Discord, Stack Overflow. And just recently, ChatGPT discovered NiceGUI, so now you can also ask ChatGPT about NiceGUI. Cutoff date is April 23, I guess. So it's not really up to date, but at least it has an idea about what NiceGUI is. The NiceGUI website, NiceGUI.io, is also written in NiceGUI, of course. It comes with a very extensive documentation where you can see and play around with all included UI elements. There are lots of interactive examples where you can try the elements right away on the website. And by the way, the O-Drive GUI, the problem which we originally had to create the NiceGUI web framework, is also available. It's an open source project. If we need to tune an O-Drive motor, then we use this GUI. And what I wanted to mention, and apart from the O-Drive GUI, basically every robotics project at our company is using NiceGUI, and we even developed a robotics framework, a framework for control robots based on NiceGUI, which integrates all together in one library. I want to conclude with a last feature we've been working on for a few months now, and which we are rolling out over the next month. So far, I explained how you can run a NiceGUI app on your machine, on your robot, and you can connect to it in your browser. This requires that you have a network connection to the robot. When you start your NiceGUI app, it presents you with ways to connect, either via local host, if you are connected to the machine directly, or with the IP of your robot. But what if your robot is somewhere in the wild and you don't have direct access, but the robot is online, maybe over a mobile network or some other way, or it's at a customer on a production site? Then we have a solution for it. What would happens to the UI run command? We simply add on air equals true, and now your robot is online, on air, and you get another way to access your robot. That's a URL, and yet you can go onto the URL and you see the same page like if you would be in a local network, the same web page. The only difference is that all the traffic is now routed over a proxy server, so you don't need virtual networks or remote desktop access. Just add this parameter and you're fine. This brings me to the end of my talk. I thank you for your attention. And if you have some time, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Falko. If anyone of you have some questions here, sure. We have a lot.
Hi, thanks for your time. I want to ask you if you know PyScript. You know it?
Sorry?
PyScript?
No.
Okay, so I don't have question if you don't know PyScript. Okay, thank you.
Not at the top of my head, sorry.
Okay, it's because I want to know if NiceGUI is complementary to PyScript or maybe are overlapped things, but we can solve.
Yeah, it's another UI framework, or?
Well, it's PyScript. It's a thing like it's like JavaScript but in Python.
Okay, yeah, maybe I've seen it. I'm not aware right now, but we can talk afterwards.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hello. Is there dark mode?
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
Luckily, both Tailwind and Quasar support dark mode, and we had to marry them together and create a nice user interface. But basically, URI run dark equals true, and this is the easiest way to get dark mode. But you can also add a switch to your website where you can switch. The NiceGUI documentation basically has a button in the header, and you can switch.
So yeah, I was wondering about the plots that you showed in the UI for, was it ODrive, is it called?
Yeah.
There's some graphs in there. I'm wondering, are they just taken from a library like matplotlib or plotly?
Oh yeah, this here. This is matplotlib. We have other plotting possibilities like high charts, e-charts, but I'm kind of used to matplotlib, and that's why I created it with matplotlib. Yeah.
Sorry, when you say that the documentation is written in NiceGUI, the documentation's on GitHub. How do you generate the site then? Is it something like a GitHub Pages site, or?
No, the documentation is not hosted on GitHub. On GitHub there's the README, but the README isn't interactive. But we host the documentation page separately, and it's a bit tricky because the page is interactive, and depending on where you are located at and where the server is located that serves the page, basically meanwhile we are running a multi-server network over the whole world with 30 or 40 servers, because everyone who is looking up the documentation is accessing the site and needs to be served UI elements, and this can create quite some load. Especially if the elements are interactive and everyone is playing around with it, but it works quite nicely.